Good afternoon. In just a short while, we're going to be joined from Kabul by Alison Davidian, who is a deputy country representative for UN Women in Afghanistan. Before that, just a couple of programming notes. As soon as our briefing here is over, we'll be joined by Amy Quantrill from the Office of the President of the General Assembly. At 2 p.m., the executive director, the relatively new executive director of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, Rob Floyd, will be here to brief you on the 25th anniversary of this Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. And tomorrow at noon, as Amy, I'm sure will tell you, President of the General Assembly 75th session, Volkan Bozkır, will be here for his final press briefing, which means we will brief after the President of the General Assembly, and we will be joined by two senior officials from UNDP, Kani Wignaraya and Abdullah Al-Dardari, who will speak to us about Afghanistan and the economic situation there. Turning to Afghanistan, our humanitarian colleagues are telling us that this week a plane carrying 53 metric tons of medicines and supplies landed in Mazar-e-Sharif. This is one of 3 flights planned in coordination with the World Food Programme. Recently, the UN Children's Fund provided safe water through water trucking to 166,000 people in areas affected by drought. UNICEF is also drilling boreholes and installing water supply systems in Balkh province. Some 3,000 students are in community-based education classes in Faryab, were taught by 100 teachers. For its part, WFP has been bringing in supplies and distributing foods to tens of thousands of people. WHO, the World Health Organization, has supported health services to tens of thousands of people in need in Kabul, Kunduz, and Helmand province. We're also told by our humanitarian colleagues that on August 30th, heavy rains and floods were reported in several districts in Kunar province, which resulted in damage to infrastructure, including roads, bridges, also damage to livestock and farmlands. Interagency assessment teams from the UN have been deployed to the impacted areas to assess humanitarian needs. UNICEF and local organizations have responded to needs in flood-affected areas of Kunar province. That is it from my part on Afghanistan. I just want to make sure our friend Alison is connected. Alison, can you hear us?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Perfect. And we can see you. That's wonderful. Alison, a big welcome to you. As a reminder, Alison Davidian is the Deputy Country Representative for UN Women, and she's speaking to us live from Kabul. So, Alison, you have the floor, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. This briefing is happening the day after the announcement of the Taliban's transitional administration that has failed to include any women and appears to have abolished the Ministry of Women's Affairs. UN Women joins many around the world in expressing deep disappointment at this development. Respect for women's rights is a litmus test for any governing authority and against which any governing authority must be judged. But with the announcement yesterday, the Taliban missed a critical opportunity to show the world that it is truly committed to building an inclusive and prosperous society. UN Women is in Kabul, and every day we're in touch with women leaders across the country who tell us about the status of women's rights in Afghanistan. So today, I'd like to share with you 2 key observations when it comes to the situation of women in Gaza and how UN Women is responding to protect and promote their rights. So firstly, the lack of clarity of the Taliban's position on women's rights has generated incredible fear. And this fear is palpable across the country. Memories are vivid of the Taliban's rule in the 1990s, where there were severe restrictions on women's rights. And women and girls are understandably afraid. And this fear is compounded by the fact that the Taliban is yet to fully articulate its position on women's rights. When they were asked at the peace table, the Taliban never went beyond stating that women's rights would be respected within the framework of Islam. In their first press conference after the fall of Kabul, they repeated the same statement, that women's rights would be respected within the framework of Islam. But every day we're receiving reports of rollbacks on women's rights. Women are prohibited from leaving the house without a mahram. In some provinces, they're stopped from going to work. Women protection centres that provide essential services for women who flee violence have been attacked. And safe houses for women human rights defenders, including journalists and activists, are at full capacity. Now is the time for the Taliban to show that it governs for all Afghans and that it has changed. In terms of UN Women's response, UN Women has been in Afghanistan for over 10 years, and our office in Afghanistan is one of UN Women's largest operations globally, and we intend to remain so. Afghan women have never needed us more. They will not give up on their rights, and neither will we. So we're doing two things to respond to the Taliban's lack of clarity on women's rights. Firstly, advocating for the protection and promotion of the full spectrum of women's rights and using every channel available to ensure that Afghan women are not just talked about, but they're heard from directly. UN Women is leading advocacy efforts to ensure that women's rights remain central to the international community's engagement on Afghanistan. The eyes of the world are on Afghanistan now, but they won't be forever. And it's important and critical that the international community continue to advocate for and highlight the situation of women and girls in this country. We're also continuing to support the work of women human rights defenders, whose work is a vital and identifiable marker of peace and security in any country. And also as part of our advocacy, we're continuing to monitor the situation of women and girls and to assess the Taliban's public commitments and promises with their actions on the ground. We're also supporting women's civil society and the women's movement to hold the space on women's rights. The women's movement and women's civil society is the key engine that continues to drive progress on women's rights, not just in Afghanistan, but globally. And if we want to move these issues forward, we need to continually invest in women-led civil society organizations. Globally, we know OECD DAC data shows that women's rights organizations receive less than 1% of official development assistance. And the only way to counter this trend is to strategically and intentionally invest in women's rights organizations through ensuring flexible and sustainable funding. UN Women works with a range of civil society partners, and we will continue to do so and to strengthen those relationships. Second observation, Afghanistan is grappling with a triple crisis of conflict, climate, and COVID, and it's leading to a humanitarian catastrophe, which is differentially impacting on women and girls. UNAMA civilian casualty reporting showed that May and June were the deadliest months on record for those months since the UN began documentation in 2009. Displacement has increased significantly because of the conflict. Over 500,000 people have been displaced since the beginning of this year. A third of the population, more than 12 million people, are experiencing emergency levels of food insecurity. And in the midst of these staggering statistics, it's easy to forget about COVID. But Afghanistan is just emerging from the peak of a crippling third wave and is at risk of a fourth wave because of large-scale population displacement and also gaps in the health system. So the Taliban have inherited a country where almost 50% of the population is in need of some form of humanitarian assistance, where the current transition and the uncertainty has led many Afghans to seek passage outside of the country. And it's well reported that women's unequal access to education, to health services, to work, to resources means that they have different vulnerabilities to men and that they're differentially impacted by conflict and displacement. So in terms of UN Women's response, we're working to provide support to ensure that the humanitarian response in Afghanistan does two things. Firstly, that it addresses the needs of the most affected women and girls. But secondly, and this is critical, that we also ensure the equal participation of women in the delivery of the humanitarian response, that we don't prioritize protection at the expense of participation. If women are stopped from coming to work to deliver humanitarian services, then women and girls simply will not access them because of gender norms that prevent women from engaging with men who aren't their relatives. If this scenario plays out, we will lose access to half the population. If we focus on protection without equally focusing on participation and empowerment, we will lose ground on both. We're also working to ensure that women and girls who are fleeing violence can access life-saving services. Afghan women experience some of the highest rates of violence in the world, and most of that violence is experienced in their own homes. 9 out of 10 women, Afghan women, have experienced at least one form of intimate partner violence in their lifetime. Whatever happens politically, it's critical that these services are available for women fleeing violence. So we're continuing to work with partners to make sure that these services are available, and we're also committed to expanding spaces to ensure that that services are available and accessible to any woman that needs them. It's arguable that in the history of Afghanistan, that it has never faced a humanitarian crisis of these proportions. But Afghanistan has an incredible resource. Its people, men and women and youth. And so it's critical going forward that the leaders of Afghanistan draw on its diversity to chart a way forward through this crisis. They cannot afford not to. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Alison, for those remarks. We'll now turn to questions. Given Alison's time is a bit short, if you could just keep it to one question, that would be great. Edie, please. Edie Letter, Associated Press.
Thank you very much, Alison. On behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, thank you for doing this briefing. You said that every day the UN has been receiving reports of Taliban crackdown in various ways against women. Could you give us some more examples? And could you also tell us how many people does UN Women have in the field, and are they spread out all over the country? Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Alison.
Thank you. So in terms of the kinds of violations that we're seeing, we are hearing that women are being prohibited from leaving their homes to go to work, or they're only being allowed to go to work with a mahram. So this is something that we're hearing and in different from province to province. We're also hearing that women are even being prohibited from leaving the house just to go and do general daily tasks. We've also received a number of reports for attacks on our protection centres that are providing services for women fleeing their homes. And also, in some cases, closures of girls' schools and co-educational schools. In terms of how many people UN Women has, so we have approximately 75 staff. 15 of those are internationals, around 50 are national staff. We do have 5 field officers in 5 provinces. They are not operating at the moment, but we are looking forward to having them operational again once the security situation improves, and also to re-establishing them as feasible in line with other UN presences. But UN Women is committed to staying and delivering in Afghanistan for women and girls.
Thank you. Pam Falk.
Thank you for the briefing. It's Pam Falk from CBS News. My question is about the recent women's protests. There have been many. They've been cracked down upon. What do you think is the trajectory of women protesting, and what are you hearing about those protests? Thanks.
Thank you for your question. We're deeply concerned by the use of force against peaceful protesters, and we would echo the words of the Secretary General for the Taliban to uphold the rights and freedoms of all citizens, and that includes the freedom for peaceful assembly and association. It's critical going forward that the Taliban adheres to human rights standards and that it governs for all Afghans and ensures equal rights and equal participation. So we'll continue to engage with the UN system and with the Taliban to support the realization of the rights of all Afghans, including the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association.
Thank you. Kristen Salome, Al Jazeera.
Hi, thank you. You talked about the importance of having women humanitarian workers, and we heard from Martin Griffiths yesterday that there were some assurances given that they would be able to do that work. When you hear about women being prevented from leaving their homes, does that apply to humanitarians as well? Have any humanitarian women attempted to go out and do their job that you know of and have been denied, or is that all in a holding pattern at waiting for things to calm down? Thank you.
So the UN has begun the negotiations with the Taliban around impartial and independent humanitarian access, and it was excellent that Martin Griffiths was able to come and really catalyse those discussions. I understand from his meeting he did emphasise the critical role of women being engaged in humanitarian delivery. I also had an opportunity to meet with him and reiterate that message. And it's critical going forward as we're negotiating with the Taliban at the national level, but also from province to province, that we are united in our advocacy on that position. We need to advocate for an approach that will allow humanitarian aid and delivery of services to all Afghans, and this will only be able to be possible when women are included and are part of the delivery of the humanitarian response. So our unification as an international community has to be aligned with this principle, has to be framed within a framework of ensuring that women are able to participate. And right now, you know, what we stand for defines who we are. So it was great to see that Martin Griffiths raised it as a priority, and we're looking forward to engaging with the Taliban going forward under the leadership of the UN, the RCHC, and being clear on this point.
Thank you. Fethi, and then Sam.
Thank you, Stéphane. Thank you, Alison, for this briefing. I will not be taking a lot of your time, but yesterday the spokesperson for Taliban announced that Taliban is going to adhere to all the international treaties if it is compatible with the Sharia laws. At face value, that means that the International Universal Declaration of Human Rights is out of the window. Any talk about women's rights, inclusivity, equality is out of the window. I'm sure you are aware under the revered Sharia law, and this is at the basic level that's agreed upon among their ulamas or scientists, that women will inherit much less than the man. Women testimony in a courtroom is not accepted as a full testimony, that they need to be two women to make one person. This is all part of the Sharia. How is UN Women is taking these statements and these announcements in this light of over-optimistic approach that Taliban might change at one point? What is your contingency that Taliban is still not going to, haven't changed? We haven't seen any change, major change yet. What is your work plan in the face of this ongoing situation? Thank you.
Thank you. First, to say that it's unacceptable that the international community would accept that women are not part of a government, not just for Afghanistan, but for any country. We wouldn't accept that for any country, and we wouldn't accept that for Afghanistan. So the disappointment within UN Women, but also throughout most of the world, is very pressing right now. We would call on the Taliban to comply with the international obligations that Afghanistan has already signed up to, and the relevant constitutional provisions. The Taliban has said that it wants to have an inclusive government, and now it's time for it to show that it governs for all Afghans, and it can't afford not to. When you look at the humanitarian catastrophe that is awaiting Afghanistan, half of the population is in need of humanitarian assistance. 1/3 of the population don't know where their next meal will come from. These statistics are so staggering that the only way that this country can get out of that is to draw on everyone and bring everyone on board to chart a way through this crisis. And the best way for Afghanistan to build long-term development and peace is to fully allow for the participation of women in public life. And that's what we will continue to advocate for. Report after report testify to the same principle, that sustainable peace, that effective governance, that a vibrant economy is inextricably linked to equality between men and women. And so our advocacy with the Taliban will continue to be that. Will continue to be that this is in the best interests of Afghanistan.
Thank you. Ibtisam Azam.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ibtisam Azam from Al Arabi Al Jadid newspaper. I have a very short follow-up regarding the complaints that you are getting. Do you have numbers, and is this that you can give us? And and if you could also please give us, if it's even brief, a description to the situation of women before Taliban took power, whether there were also discrimination under the law, so that we also are able to understand which changes are this one going through, beside the things that you described. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So the reports that we receive in terms of the violations happening against women is through our extensive network of women civil society, women leaders, and also human rights defenders. And we're in touch with them every day, and this is how our information is channeled. And in terms of what the situation was like before, I think that there have been three very strong gains that women have made in Afghanistan over the decades. The first is that there has been a very strong legal and institutional architecture that has supported women's rights. There is the 2004 Constitution, which enshrines gender equality. Now there are laws that make violence against women illegal. There was a Ministry for Women's Affairs dedicated to promoting women's rights. So we had a strong legal and institutional architecture to protect women's rights. But secondly, I think this is very critical, is that women have been visible in public life. 27% of parliamentarians before the fall of Kabul were women. Almost 30% of the civil service were women. Women were judges, reporters, police. They were administering life-saving vaccines, delivering life-saving services. They were public and visible in ways that they weren't during the 1990s. During the Taliban rule specifically. And I think a third big difference over the past decades has been girls' ability to go to school. So in 1999, no girl was able to attend secondary school, and only 9,000 girls were in primary school. Now 3.5 million girls are in school, and women are able to pursue higher education. These are some of the key gains that have been made. Of course, there are problems. The violence against women statistics have been staggering. Women's labour force participation is also very low, 22%. 70% of women are illiterate. So there are deep problems. but the institutional architecture for accountability and the visibility of women and their access to education have been huge gains that we cannot lose.
Thank you. Just one clarification, because the sound was not clear. What was the percentage of women that you say are illiterate?
70%.
70. Thank you. We'll go to the. Thank you. We'll go to the screen. Abdelhamid Sayam.
Thank you, Ms. Alison, for this briefing. My name is Abdelhamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. First, you said that women had been subject to the most volume of violence probably in the world. And 20 years of U.S. domination, occupation, intervention, and putting puppet governments, why they didn't do something about that? I mean, it sounded like women were living in paradise, and only on August 15, they are stepping into hell. How could that be convincing after 20 years of U.S. domination of the country? Why there's 70% of women are illiterate? Why there are 4.2 million women, girls don't go to school as we speak? Not because of after August 15, but before. Why is that? I mean, how many press conferences you held to talk about how women were subject to violence and maltreatment during?
Okay, Abdelhamid, I think we get your point. Alison?
Thank you for your question. Look, every country in the world, even the country with the highest gender equality indicators, experiences violence against women. This is a global phenomenon. It's not just unique to Afghanistan. And 20 years is not a very long time to make the kind of social norm changes required to really address and eliminate violence. It's a long-term goal. And I'm not also saying that we've only seen progress in 20 years. The women's movement in Afghanistan, women have been fighting for their rights in the face of incredible obstacles for centuries. Afghan women got the right to vote in this country before American women got the right to vote. The first girls' school was established in the 1920s. The previous constitution enshrined gender equality. So it's not just about the last 20 years that we've seen progress. But what we're saying now is that we cannot go back. We cannot go back to a situation where Afghan women were erased. And critical to ensuring that they are able to realize their rights is that they have to be able to have the same access to public and political life as men. And that's what we will be advocating for, the full spectrum of women and girls' rights, not just the right to not have violence against you, but the right to stand for parliament. It's the full spectrum of rights.
Thank you very much. I think we'll take one last question from Michelle Nichols at Reuters. Michelle?
Much for the briefing. I just wanted to follow up on, you said at the start that it appeared that the Ministry of Women had been abolished. Has the Taliban confirmed that in any way to the UN? And then just when it comes to what are you hearing from women on the ground on how they plan to fight for their rights and how they're mobilizing as we kind of wait and see, I guess, what the Taliban are going to do? Thanks.
Thanks for that. So no official confirmation that the Ministry of Women has been abolished, but it was an instance that was, and we also haven't heard anything about a Human Rights Commission, Civil Service Commission. So there was a lot of gaps, but at the moment we haven't received official confirmation that it's been abolished. And in terms of what we're hearing, I mean, I think there's profound disappointment at the news from last night when the cabinet was announced, and I think we're seeing through the protests that Afghan women will not give up their rights. They will not be erased. And I think what's key right now is to get the funding, strategic, intentional funding to women-led civil society organizations to women-led organizations not only working on protection, but also on empowerment and participation activities. This is the engine for progress. These are the drivers for progress and for accountability. So we need to be making sure that they have the funds they need to do their work.
Thank you very much, Alison. We can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak to us here. Good luck and stay safe in Kabul, and we hope to maybe invite you back in 10 days or so to just catch up on your work and on the situation on the ground.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So as a reminder, Amy will brief right after you are all done with me. This morning, the Secretary General spoke virtually at the opening session of the high-level dialogue on the Americas on climate action, which was hosted by Argentina. He said that with less than 60 days left before COP26, we all need to work together to overcome the current stalemate. He underscored the need to align the pandemic recovery packages with 1.5 degrees climate objective and to invest in adaptation, resilience, to deal with the impact of climate change. In Glasgow, he said, we need to restore trust. That goes hand in hand with providing support to developing countries on vaccines, on debt, on liquidity, as well, of course, as on climate finance. Mr. Guterres also said that developing countries need support to implement a just transition that will ensure workers in high-emission industries will have alternate options and social protection. His remarks have been shared with you. And at the Security Council, the Secretary General also took part in the debate on peacekeeping and transitions, in which he said that transitions are complex processes that involve a careful reconfiguration of the UN's presence, strategy, and footprint in the country. Success, he added, depends on early and sustained collaboration among field missions, host governments, UN country teams, and, of course, local and global partners. The drawdown of UN peacekeeping can be an exciting moment for a country emerging from conflict, but the Secretary General added it is also a moment of heightened risk. Years of peace building and protection gains are at stake, and the role of the UN and the global community remains essential as these countries continue their journeys. His full remarks were shared with you. A quick update from what is going on in Guinea. Our UN team on the ground says and at the regional level are continuing to monitor the situation closely. Our resident coordinator there, Vincent Martin, is coordinating efforts to share regular updates and communicate with key international partners. Our team on the ground also remains committed to supporting the country, including in its ongoing efforts to tackle multiple impacts of COVID, while also monitoring the Ebola situation, which was declared just over 3 months ago. And as we mentioned yesterday, the head of the UN Office for West Africa and the Sahel, Mahamet Saleh Annadif, is participating in the ECOWAS summit that is taking place as we speak. And turning to Syria, I can tell you that we are deeply concerned about the ongoing hostilities in the country and their impact on civilians. Since June, hostilities in northwest Syria have intensified despite the March 2020 ceasefire. In recent days, attacks in southern rural Idlib have reportedly impacted residential areas and a camp for internally displaced persons, resulting in civilian casualties. The 3 incidents between September 6th and 7th reportedly resulted in the deaths of 4 civilians and left at least 7 civilians injured, including women and children. We remind all parties to the Syrian conflict to respect their obligations under international humanitarian law and to ensure the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure. And our friends at the UN mission in Libya welcomed the mediation exercised by the Libyan Prime Minister to ensure the unity and integrity of the national oil company. The unhindered operation of the National Oil Corporation remains a cornerstone to Libyan security and economy. It remains of the utmost importance that it operates as an impartial actor and one that works for the interests of all Libyans and the country as a whole. And a quick note from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which has now declared an outbreak of meningitis in the Chopo province in the country's northeast. Some 261 suspected cases, including 129 deaths. This is a fatality ratio of 50%. The country's health authorities have deployed an initial emergency team with the support of the World Health Organization. Efforts are underway to quickly ramp up the response. A crisis committee has been set up in Banalia, the community impacted by the outbreak, as well as Kisangani, the provincial capital. WHO has provided medical supplies in Banalia and plans to deploy more experts and resources to the area. Quick COVAX update, this one from Venezuela, which received yesterday its first shipment of COVAX with nearly 700,000 doses of vaccines. This is the first of several deliveries to immunize approximately 20% of the country's total population. This batch is in addition to more than 9 million doses Venezuela has received through bilateral agreements. Our team on the ground continues working with Venezuela to address multiple impacts of the pandemic. And today is International Literacy Day. This year, the day will be celebrated with the theme Literacy for a Human-Centered Recovery, Narrowing the Digital Divide. In a message for the day, Audrey Azoulay, UNESCO's Director General, notes that progress in literacy across the world continues to be hampered by the pandemic. She points out that a lack of access to distance learning has meant more than 500 million students have been left behind, as they've been unable to continue learning how to read and write, and in some cases have been unable to commence their schooling. That's 500 million people. Ms. Azoulay said the virus highlights the tremendous importance of education and the needs to step up our efforts. I will now make an effort and answer your questions. Philippe.
Thank you, Steph. At the beginning of the briefing, you told us about this plane who landed in Mazar. Mm-hmm. Is it possible that you went take people in this kind of plane to when they left, people who want to leave the country?
No, these are humanitarian flights meant to rotate, to bring in humanitarian aid, if needed, also rotate humanitarian personnel. That being said, it is clear that, as in any country, people who wish to leave the country be allowed to do so, and if they are fleeing violence or persecution, that they be given refuge. Edie, and then Kristen.
Thank you, Steph. A follow-up on Mr. Griffiths. Is he planning to do any other travels, including directly to Afghanistan himself?
I mean, nothing immediate for a return visit. My understanding is that he'll be heading to Geneva to be there on Monday for the humanitarian appeal. And then at some point he'll be back here in New York, where he's based, and we hope to have him here. But obviously, if there are any other trips, we will flag them to you.
Could I put in a request from, I'm sure, all of us for him to come here? We have not, as far as I know, spoken to him.
No, I mean, we had him from Doha early this week. No, but he's here. We'd like to have him in the flesh. Ms. Salome.
Do you have any reports or confirmation of reports out of Ethiopia about Tigrayan forces killing civilians?
No, we don't have anything to confirm. We've seen a lot of very disturbing reports of human rights violations from all the parties in the conflict, and also very harrowing reports of famine. We have been talking about the risks of famine for quite some time, but we don't have any first-hand accounts of these reports that we can share with you. Pam, and then I will come to you, Fati.
Thank you. On the 13th, the SG goes to Geneva. Can you give a little fleshing out of that? Is that an in and out, or will he make other...
No, he will be in Geneva, arriving Monday, leaving Tuesday. The focus is to launch the Afghanistan humanitarian appeal.
And he'll be back for the opening of the UNGA.
How could the show open without one of its stars?
All right. When, I know this is a PGA question to some extent, but when will you know how many heads of state will be in person and how many?
Look, we do expect a sort of an updated list of speakers to be available soon. I will turn.
No, but
I know. Okay. I think everything remains very fluid. So closer to the date, we'll have a bit more details. But I know some who had expressed interest in coming who are now no longer coming at the presidency level. So it's an ongoing process, and I know you're all trying to plan. We're all trying to plan. Our security colleagues, our protocol colleagues are planning, but listen, we live in a world, if any time, that plans, what is it? Man plans, God laughs. Yes.
And
if I may quote,
one last one, which is just, is the SG meeting with President Biden at some point before UNGA?
No.
Okay.
If I may quote, President Eisenhower said, plans are nothing. Planning is everything.
Yes, exactly. We're doing everything in that case.
Just a quick request. I know you don't have the answer for it. Bolivia yesterday announced it's going to introduce cryptocurrencies as a legal tender into its economy. Is there a possibility to have a briefing from some of our colleagues at the Economic Affairs? Since this represents.
That's a good question. I will. It's a very good. It's a good question, and I would be happy to have somebody brief and actually explain to me how cryptocurrencies work, because I've tried and I've failed.
No, but I mean, as a member state.
No, I know, I get it, and because it'll have real world consequences. Mr. Iftikhar Ali, and then we'll go to Alan. Iftikhar.
Thank you, Steph. Just a bit of information. This second confinement of medical supplies to Mazar-e-Sharif, was it carried by Pakistan International Airlines, as was done before?
Sorry? Was it done by Pakistan? I do not know. What I do know is that WFP has been operating flights. I can try to find out.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bulkati, and then we'll go to Michelle Nichols.
Thank you, Stéphane. Former president of Afghanistan, Guinea, said that he would welcome the audit under the auspices of the UN or other independent organizations to prove that he hadn't taken any money of the Afghanistan. Any comment from your part?
We have not been contacted in any way, shape, or form on this issue. So I will leave it at that, except to say that obviously it is very important that the resources of the Afghan people go to the Afghan people. Okay, I think that's it. I don't see or hear any more questions. Sorry. Oh, Michelle, yes, you were in my head, but I forgot to verbalize it. Go ahead, Michelle.
I'm on the screen. Sorry, just a quick follow-up to something Martin Griffiths said yesterday about humanitarian flights restarting back into Kabul in the coming days. Do you have any update on that? Thanks.
No, I was just in a discussion with some of his senior colleagues. There is a lot of discussions going on. We do know that some countries are operating flights, that there's been some upgrades to the airport. We're not yet in a position to bring in flights, but we do hope that will happen very soon. Have a good day. Today is Wednesday. As a reminder, Amy is about to brief. Tomorrow, my briefing will be delayed. I will wait for the PGA to finish. And on Friday, the Secretary General will be here to do my job. Cheers.
Good afternoon, everybody. Tomorrow at 12 o'clock, the President of the 75th session of the General Assembly, His Excellency Mr. Volkan Bozkır, will give a final press conference in the press briefing room. It is a hybrid event much like today, so people will be able to join remotely, or please come in person if you're available. The President will make brief opening remarks and then take questions. If you plan on asking a question, please feel free to signal that to me beforehand, because I'll be moderating the event and that will help me organise all the questions. Thanks. So this morning, the President spoke at the General Assembly high-level plenary meeting to commemorate and promote the International Day Against Nuclear Tests. Since nuclear weapons testing began on the 16th of July 1945, over 2,000 have taken place. The President said, "These tests have long-lasting health and environmental consequences. They devastate the communities they impact. They displace families from their homeland." The President welcomed the progress that has been achieved towards nuclear disarmament in the past year and urged for postponed meetings to be rearranged. In the context of this high-level meeting, the President also met with Dr. Rob Floyd, who is the Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. The President thanked Dr. Floyd for his efforts towards eliminating nuclear threats. And finally, I'm happy to announce my successor will be Monica Vieira-Grayley, who will take over as the spokesperson to the next PGA on the 14th of September. Many of you will remember Monica as the spokesperson from the 73rd session of the General Assembly to Miss Maria Fernanda Espinosa. Monica will join the Office of the President of the General Assembly from the Department of Global Communications and has served the United Nations as Chief of UN News Portuguese, Director of the United Nations Information Center in Mexico, among other posts. Prior to joining the United Nations, Monica worked at the BBC World Service in London as a multimedia journalist and editor. In the 1990s, she served as a producer at Deutsche Welle in Germany. Monica started her career as a radio talk show hostess in Brazil, where she also worked for TV and press. She is fluent in Spanish, German, Portuguese, and English, and utilizes French as a working language in the UN. Thank you. Hi, Philippe.
Thank you, Amy. Can you confirm that there is a summit on the climate on the 20th and a summit on the food on the 23rd?
I will double check those dates, but I believe they are correct, yes, and I'll let you know. Those events are being organised by the Secretariat rather than OPGA.
And are they virtual or it's physical?
I believe they are virtual, yes.
Virtual?
Yeah. Hi, Edie.
Hi, Amy. Can you give us any indication of what the PGA is hearing about what leaders, or how many leaders are going to be coming to the high-level week?
So the last speakers list from the general debate indicated whether the videos were going to be sent as pre-recorded statements or not. I believe there's another list which is going to be coming out soon, which should be an updated version of that list.
When is soon?
I was expecting it this week. Hi, Pam.
The craziness begins. Just in terms of what Edie just asked, meaning the next list will say whose videos, so we can deduce that those aren't video or in person.
So the previous list indicated whether it was going to be a pre-recorded statement or not, so I would expect the next list would do the same thing.
Got it. Yeah. Okay.
But I haven't seen it yet.
And just in terms of, if I may, policy on vaccinations, there were a few rounds of talks, including one that said that there was, that the SG's office would require vaccinations of some and showing of tests. And I assume that meant staff. And so, like a foreign minister who comes in, there won't be anything the UN does to ask for vaccination or tests. It'll be up to New York State or New York City, correct?
So as far as I'm aware, everyone coming into the UN building is subject to the same regulations which have been set out in the letters that we previously discussed, which is an honour system. I don't know if the SG's office require extra steps. I think that question is probably better directed at Stéphane.
But in terms of speakers at the UN, it's an honour system?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a great day.